Hi, I'm Mark and I'm all about psychology, tech and productivity, and in today's video I'm going to be going over our 6-month review of owning a Tesla Model 3. Let's get into it. So it's been 6 months since I picked up our Tesla from the Trafford Centre in Manchester, and since then I've been posting a few videos about our ownership experience to date. So if you're interested in knowing more about the cost of ownership, what it's like to drive, what it's like to charge, some of the things we love about this car and also some of the things we don't like so much, this one's for you. So let's start with the driving experience. Now we've put almost 5,000 miles on the clock, and it's safe to say our switch from a big diesel guzzling SUV to an all-electric has been pretty impeccable. So the sensation and the absence of engine noise when in an electric car is a really futuristic experience, and everyone who's been in the car comments on how comfy the seats are and how smooth the ride is. And of course that makes sense, there are no gears, no engine, and it's a really nice, easy place to spend time as a driver. And also we have the added benefit of intelligent cruise control and autopilot for longer motorway driving. Now I've only tended to use these on M roads and established A roads, as I've had a few hairy experiences attempting to switch into autopilot on country roads. The autopilot just isn't ready for UK rural roads with poor road markings just yet, and it has a tendency to take bends just a little bit too quickly and veer a tad too close to the near side of the road for my personal preference. Still, this is a feature that comes as standard with all Model 3s, and it's a great thing to have at your disposal. And city driving is fine too. One of the reasons that we switched to an EV was because we realised that we mainly do journeys that are in and around our city. Now because the car has quite a sporty feel to it, it's pretty low slung and it's got quite a firm suspension, be prepared to feel a bit more of the road than maybe you might be used to, especially if you're used to one of the competitor saloons that have air suspension built in. It's nothing to be concerned about, but if you do go over a speed bump or hit a pothole, you will feel it. So let's talk about power. Automatic, instant torque. It never gets old being able to accelerate so rapidly when you need to. And a friend said to me the other day in the car, it feels a bit like a roller coaster, and I think it's a really good analogy, that sense of just pure continuous acceleration without moving through gears is unlike any other sensation you've experienced. It's a bit like being on a rocket ship, in the best possible way of course. And in terms of keeping that power in the car, I've seen some reports of issues with phantom drain and quite unusual battery drain overnight when the car's parked up and is not being charged. And I can't say we've noticed a huge problem here. It's not uncommon to find the car on the exact same battery percentage as when you left it overnight. Over the cold winter months here in the UK, it was quite common to see a drop of maybe 1% overnight. Now that's equivalent to losing about 4 miles of range. Not too bad, I don't think. So let's move on to charging. So we made the decision pretty early on to fit a home charger, and we've mainly used this to charge our car. It's obviously super convenient to just plug your car in when you go to bed and wake up to a full battery in the morning. Public charging has been okay. There are plenty of them here in this city in York. The ones near the town centre tend to be either Pod Point or BP Pulse, and they're paid for via apps or cards that you have to apply for. But the added benefit here is that whilst EVs are still relatively new, it's a great way of pretty much guaranteeing a parking space in a busy city like York. Plus, most of the charging spots in the city allow you free parking while you're charging. So if you're in the city for a couple of hours, it's actually cheaper to park up, set your car to charge than it is to park anywhere else and pay the council's astronomical parking fees. So this is worth checking out if you're visiting a city that you don't know for a break. Have a look at the parking versus the charging costs, because you might be able to save yourself some money. Now I've used a few superchargers, and whilst they tend to be on the more expensive side of the charging options that are available, the experience of using a supercharger is really hard to beat. Firstly, they're really easy to navigate to using the car's built-in sat-nav. Then you just park up, plug in, and you're away at blisteringly fast charging speeds. There's no silly apps to sign up to or payment made in advance, they just work. Now I'll come on to overall ownership costs in just a second, but just as a comparison in terms of costs. At the time of filming, our home charger costs us about 18 pence per kilowatt hour, whereas public charging can be anything from completely free to about 30 to 40 pence per kilowatt hour on average. And Tesla superchargers are charged at 28 pence per kilowatt hour. But they have an overstay fee of £1 per minute if you don't drive away shortly after your vehicle is charged. So, in real terms, let's say you were about to top up from a 20% charge and you wanted to get to an 80% charge. Now that would equate to about £7 over 6 hours to do that charge at home on my current energy tariff. That could be free, or anything between £7 and £15 over 6 hours to an hour over a public charger, depending on which type you used, and about £13 and 20 minutes using a Tesla supercharger. So there are loads of options there, and of course they're all far cheaper than using petrol or diesel. Now, you may have seen my recent video which covered our first road trip in this car, and again, it really wasn't an issue to think about charging stops and charging times. There are plenty of great apps about that do a really good job helping you plan for this, and although it might seem daunting at first, there really hasn't been an occasion where we've come anywhere near close to running out of charge. Every time I drive past a service station, it seems like there are more and more options available for electric vehicles, and the infrastructure here in the UK is getting better and better to handle that increase in the popularity of all electric vehicles and hybrids. Now, under charging, there's also the question of how much have we spent on charging so far, so we might as well get into that next. So on to costs. Now, in one of my previous videos, I compared the ownership costs of our previous car against the Model 3 after just 1 month. So I had to do a fair bit of estimating there. Now, the other thing I did was to look at our previous car costs based on the 2020 year, in which we were in full lockdown for a huge portion of the time and we barely did any driving at all. So I thought I'd do a like-for-like comparison in the same 6-month period from 2018 to 2019 with our ICE car against that same period with our Tesla, so it's a bit more of a fair comparison. So obviously fuel costs in recent months have gone through the roof, but I'm just going to keep those as they were in 2018, 2019 for the purpose of this comparison. And this is what we found. So insurance, pretty much the same. Obviously with the Tesla, there's no road tax to pay. And so far we've had no servicing costs, although we did scuff one of the alloys quite soon after getting the car home, so this will need repairing. Now I estimate this is going to be about £100 to £200 to fix. And charging wise, this is the total we spent on charging over those 6 months, and this is a bit of a blend of home charging, public charging which has been both paid for and free, and also using up those supercharger miles whilst they were still on my account. And what I haven't done is put on our leasing costs, as obviously there are many leasing deals around which are dependent on lots of factors, but suffice to say we also pay a little bit less on our lease for our Model 3 than we did with the BMW. So in summary here, I'm really happy that through switching we've clearly saved a considerable amount of money already compared to our previous car. So I've covered quite a lot of detail here and in the previous section. Let's go into a quick fire round of things we love and things we don't like so much about this car. Let's go. So first up, things we love. Number 1, keyless entry. Your phone is your key and you can run all kinds of commands through your phone to control and monitor the car. Welcome to the future. Number 2, in-car entertainment. So we've got easy access to Bluetooth streaming, Spotify, Netflix, YouTube, and all kinds of games. It just makes it a pleasure to spend time in this car, even if you're just parked up and waiting. Plus, this is the best sound system I've heard in any car. Another thing, one pedal driving. So I tend to have our car in the hold mode, which means about 90% of the time I drive around without even touching the brake, as when you lift off the accelerator, the car automatically starts channeling energy back into the battery and will eventually slow down to a complete stop, even on a hill. Last one, software upgrades. So in most cars, the car you have after 4 to 5 years is significantly worse than the car that you picked up when you first owned. Now this isn't necessarily true with a Tesla. Even in the last 6 months I've seen new games, better recharge efficiency, and a whole new user interface appear in an over-the-air update whilst the car's been parked up. And I really love the frequency that the Tesla team are putting into making sure that the car is constantly being upgraded without you needing to take it into a service centre. Now, there are many other things that we love about this car, but I do want to appear balanced, so I'm not going to go on and on. If you're watching this as a Tesla owner, let me know in the comments, what do you love the most about this car? Now let's flip this round and take a look at some of the things we're not so fond of. And before we get into this bit, it's worth saying these are pretty minor niggles in the grand scheme of things, but nonetheless, they are annoyances, so I'm going to talk about them. First up, the indicator stalks. So it's been 6 months, I still haven't got the hang of these. So the main problem seems to be that the command to indicate and flash for a few seconds, as you would if you were switching lanes on a motorway, is very similar to the command to indicate and keep the lights on, flashing until the wheel turns. So automatically, it also defaults to the center position, so it won't click and stay down as you maybe got used to in another car model. So in practice, you can sometimes tap the stalk and nothing happens, or if you press it too hard, you then have to press it the opposite direction to turn it off, and can sometimes just end up flashing both sides and confusing drivers around you. Also, the ticking sound is so quiet on these and the on-screen indicator is so subtle, it's really easy just to leave them on and forget. Now the recent update, which flashes up the camera feed from your blind spot, is a much better reminder that the indicator's left on, but it's still something I'd love to see fixed in an update. In all likelihood, this will be a hardware update for a new Model 3, as this is unlikely to be fixed in a software update. Next up, autopilot. So as I mentioned earlier, autopilot is great, but it's not perfect. Phantom braking is a thing, as well as phantom swerving. There have been a few occasions where I've been happily moving along in autopilot in the left-hand lane of the motorway and approaching an exit, and it's almost as though the car gets confused between, should I stay and take this exit or should I stay in the current lane? and a couple of times it's swerved pretty wildly when it's made its mind up. Now this has only happened a couple of times, and of course if you're using autopilot you should be focused on the road and be able to take over at a moment's notice, but I've got to admit it was pretty terrifying when that happened. Next up, the UI. Now it can be pretty laggy when you're accessing things like Sentry Mode or the entertainment features, and yes, it's great to have these features, but considering how snappy everything else is, it does seem odd to have to wait for so long to access certain parts of the user interface. So finally, let's talk about these aero covers. Now you might have guessed I mentioned these. Okay, they look pretty cool and supposedly help with aerodynamics and efficiency, but there is a major flaw. Now the actual alloy is left exposed when you've got these fitted, and this is one of the reasons it's so easy to curve these wheels, because they sit a bit proud from the wheel and they're completely unprotected against any kind of knocks or scuffs. So there we have it, and again, any of you are Model 3, Model Y owners, let me know in the comments anything I missed here that's a bit of a niggle you have with your vehicle. So those are some of my thoughts after 6 months and 5,000 miles of ownership. As always, if you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to reply and help out. If you enjoyed this, you might like to see some of my other Tesla videos. There'll be a playlist coming up in just a second. This includes things like accessories that I purchased, apps that you can check out, and also what it was like getting our home charger fitted. And in the meantime, if you found this video helpful, please do click the like button and maybe even a cheeky subscribe. I'll see you next time.